Okay, why don't we get started? Welcome everybody to the 2020 Virtual Summit here with the USCCE. My name's Cameron Kiosoglous, and I'll be the moderator of the first session here this morning. Want to welcome people from all over the planet for this first USCCE Virtual Summit. We'll be focusing on the future of coaching education and coach development. And before we get started and introduce our panelists, I wanted just to go through just a couple of opening comments. The main room session here will be recorded. And so for those of you that are online, if you can rename your feature just to let us know who you are and what organization you're affiliated with, that'd be very helpful just in terms of when your questions come in. And we encourage questions and any comments into the chat function as we go through. That'll our speakers will be able to see those questions as they come in, so they'll be able to address them either during their comments, or we will have a question and answer section after each of the presenters have shared some of their opening thoughts. This first session is focusing on the day in the life of a coach developer. So we may have some time towards the end here to go into breakout rooms. But we're planning a 75-minute session, and then our second session will start in about an hour and a half, 12:30 Eastern time. As I said, at this first session, I'll be looking at the coach developer. What do we do? Why are we important? And I think our panelists here today will kick off with Steve Jones from Steel Sport, and he's got a fabulous presentation and some great ideas which I think for each of us to be able to take a couple of great nuggets away. For what we all do as coach developers. Matt Wilkie from Irish Rugby, a fellow Australian as well, will be chatting about his perspective in Ireland, and then we'll hand it over to Flint Dougchuck to talk about the cool things that are going on with USA Hockey, and then our international man of mystery, Pelle, will be talking about his Norwegian background, but the work he's doing in Zambia. He's also spent time, like a number of us, in Japan at the NCDA. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this session. And Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to share your screen. And as you're doing that, Steve, want to thank our sponsors, KT Tape, for coming to the table and sponsoring the first virtual summit here. So Steve, I'm going to stop my share and over to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, a thank you to Cam, to Kristen for getting me involved, and to the USCCE for carrying on this such important work that we try to share ideas, experiences, so that all of us can become a little bit better at everything we do. And ultimately, what should that lead to? And that's a more positive experience for our athletes, right? So even when we talk about coach development, the end result is what our coaches are doing on the field. I work with Steel Sports. I'm the head of the Steel Sports coaching system. We've been working on it for 7 years now. And what I want to share with you all today is a professional development program and coach development system that really we've been working on for about 20 years. And the reason I can share these ideas is, quite honestly, over the last 20 years, I've made so many mistakes, there can't be too many left to make. So the reason that I've learned is, you know, in the words of the great John Dewey, I believe, although there's some debate about that, we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting upon experience. And it wasn't until I was 40 until I actually realized that. So all I'm sharing humbly with you all today is my experiences and the development of what I think is a meaningful and worthwhile coach developer system. And I'm based in the youth sports industry here in the United States of America. We work in several states across the country, and we work in the fields of soccer, baseball, and softball. So having said that, I just want to be very clear about what I believe the key elements of a successful coach development program are. Hopefully you can see this.
That looks good there, Steve. Yep.
We're all coach developers. We have a program of some semblance, or we want to have a program. And in my opinion, if you don't have the following 4 key elements, it won't be successful. So for me, everything has to be aligned within your program. So a coach development program has to emphasize your particular organization's mission, vision, core values, whatever statements you have out there. And I truly believe that adopting an outside program will not work. Now, can you adopt a model? Absolutely. You can find a model that you like, but you cannot adopt the program wholesale because it will not reflect those things that should be essential to your program. So you have to have a mission, a vision, what you are trying to achieve, clearly established, and your coach development program has to be aligned with that for it to work effectively, in my opinion. Collaboration. All coach development is a collaborative process. We know that. I don't particularly like academic language. I like language we all understand, but I have included the word empathic. And I include that word because what that means is an honest, open, focused, non-judgmental exchange of ideas and opinions. I believe as coaches, we sometimes create a barrier between ourselves and our athletes because of the knowledge we have. And I believe as coach developers, that can happen too. So whether I'm an experienced coach watching a coach for the first time, or those roles are reversed, there is an equal amount to be learned. So we cannot be judgmental about what we believe to be correct. We have to be open to opinions. And essentially, I fundamentally don't believe that we develop coaches. I believe what we do is facilitate that they engage and become a person with a growth mindset. The third thing that I think is essential is transparency. And in the youth sports world, this is something that there isn't enough of. There isn't enough of this between organizations and parents, athletes and coaches and coach developers. Transparency means that any coach that we view, that we go and watch coach, is fully aware of what it is we are looking at and what feedback they're going to be given. They also need to be trained in those areas. So when we onboard any coach in Steel Sports, they go through a 6-hour online learning module that we call the Foundations of Positive Coaching. They understand what our main aims are: developing character, building people with good life skills, creating athletes and people to the same focus and extent. So they know that when we come out to see them, we're going to be equally focused on their relationships and communication and our core values as we are on their technical X's and O's and game understanding. So you need to make sure that your staff are completely clear about what it is you expect from them and what it is you're going to assess them upon and what feedback you're going to give them. They should also be familiar with the forms and the process ahead of time. There's no need to hide any of these details. The only thing I would say is I do not share usually when I'm going to go and watch a coach, and that's a purely practical decision. Schedules change, sometimes mine, sometimes theirs, sometimes there's weather issues. But in every other element of the program, there should be complete transparency, which, as we know, will then build trust between us and them.
Steve, why don't we, I think we might have to come back to you there. I think the internet, we've just lost you for a little bit. Because I know you've got a bunch more to share. Let's see if we can work on your internet connection. Matt, why don't we flick it over to you, and we'll see if we can get Steve's internet sorted. Because I know that Steve's connection there with some of the strategic elements certainly fit with the larger system that you're working with Irish Rugby, and we'll try and get Steve back there. But why don't we flick it over to you and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Irish Rugby and coach development.
Yeah, certainly, Cam. And everybody, thank you very much for the opportunity to come along today to the USCCE. Absolute privilege for an Aussie bloke working up with Irish Rugby to be able to be on this panel today. So thank you very much. I felt the best way for me, coach developers, to share a day in the life of was again to share this through a little short presentation. And I only have about sort of 5 to 6 minutes to share with you some insight, but I wanted to make it as relevant and practical as I could. So in the next 5 minutes, I just want to share structurally what coach development looks like for us here at the Irish Rugby Football Union, and then give an indication of some of the tasks that I would work on and be involved in the development of our high performance coaches, which is a specific element of the population that I'm working with. So the first thing I wanted to do, everybody, is just give an indication on the operating structure of coach development within Irish Rugby. So my role is head of coach development, which you can see on the top tier of the chart there. And I sit within the high performance department of Irish Rugby. I oversee, I guess I have 2 main categories of responsibility. The first one is to oversee everything that happens from a coach development, education and training point of view, right from the first time coach at the under 5 level through to our professional coaches coaching at Olympic level, our national teams and at Rugby World Cups. Underneath me then, I do have a national coach development manager, which is the central box there. They sit within what we call our domestic rugby department. So that is all of our amateur game. That is club, community and school rugby. Underneath that staff member then, we have provincial coach development staff. And for those that aren't aware, Ireland is split into 4 provinces or 4 states. And then within each of those provinces, we would have anywhere from 4 to 6 staff who are on the ground in the operational arm of our coach development programs for Irish Rugby Football Union. I spend most of my time working very closely with our high performance coaches, and that's what I'll share with you in a moment. And then I guide and provide the strategic direction for the national coach development manager, who sits, as mentioned, in that domestic rugby team, to deliver our formal and informal education and training programs, which equate to our accreditation and re-accreditation structures. A day in the life of, for me then, predominantly goes into what I do with our professional coaches. So we have high performance coaches across men and women's 15-a-side rugby, men and women's 7-a-side rugby, and then each of our 4 provinces compete in professional rugby tournaments as well. So the majority of my time is dedicated to working with those coaches and coaching teams that sit within those environments. I feel very fortunate to be working in this space, but for me, it is something that I'm always continually working on and continually developing in relation to how I help these coaches develop. And the top line in my slide here indicates, I suppose, the simple version for me that I get out of bed and set myself that task every day. What can I do to help coaches get better? I know a lot of you have been involved in coach education and coach development for a long time, and it has evolved a lot very recently. It's moved very quickly away from what was traditional education and training to more development, and even moving beyond that now. But for me, it's this simple notion when someone asks me, what do? Essentially, I do what I can to help our professional and our high performance coaches get better. And if I had to articulate it at this point in time, that slide is probably a representation, very roughly, of what I try to do with each of our coaches. First of all, I've got to build a relationship. Then I work with them in relation to building their ability to self-reflect and be self-aware. I would then utilize technology such as video to capture some of them in action. We would then co-evaluate this coaching performance, and off the back of that, create a continual learning and development plan. For the last piece that I want to share then is just a little bit of a practical insight into what this looks like. And it's not me sitting here suggesting this is the best way to go about it. This is just what is working for me at this moment in the context within Irish Rugby and the coaches that I work with. A large part of what I do, as I mentioned, is capture our coaches in action. And for me, in a rugby point of view, there's 4 key areas that I strive to do that. In the team meeting environment, on the training pitch, during a game, and then during halftime. And so I utilize technology in the way of our video cameras to capture our coaches in action. So as you can see here now on your screen, just an example of a coach delivering in a team meeting environment, a coach delivering on the training pitch. We're very fortunate in rugby that we have a lot of video analysis, so training and games are always captured. I just use a radio microphone to capture the coach as well, to be able to hear what they're saying, and use our data analysis systems to sync up the footage that I capture with the training or game footage. We can see here then, this is a match day with the coaches in the bottom right-hand corner, synced up again to the match, and then finally look to capture them at halftime as well. So for me, this is a critical part of what I'm doing day to day. It's either working with the coaches to be capturing some of this footage, working with them to be, I suppose, co-evaluating their performance that we see through here, or working with them in relation to just getting a better understanding of what it is they can be doing to further improve their coaching. One thing I try to make sure I do is that the learning and development is continual. And so after that co-evaluation, I make sure I'm always providing some written feedback. And this then leads me through to the creation of a personal development plan for each of those coaches I mentioned earlier. This plan is very individualized, it's very bespoke. And off the back of that, then I work as closely as I can with the coaches that I'm responsible for servicing, for want of a better word, to deliver upon these learning goals on a season by season objective. I'll jump out of that now because I'm conscious of time, but if there is any questions that have arisen off that very short presentation or come up later, I'm more than happy to dive into a bit more detail for anyone who's on the call.
Great, Matt. Thank you. There is a good question here from Jody about the co-evaluation. and bringing people into that process. Can you speak a little bit to what you find is an effective approach to collaborating in that conversation? How do you guys do that?
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost for me, I've got to establish a good relationship before I go to that next step. So if I'm coming in all guns blazing, capturing footage without building a relationship, it doesn't seem to be that successful. What I try to do is capture what's relevant for that individual coach, give them an opportunity to watch it back. So if we have videoed it, give them the time to watch it back. So that might be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then always through a face-to-face sit down, just have a conversation with them where I'm trying to pull out what they saw in relation to what was good and what could be better. And I deliberately don't give too much structure to that conversation or give them too much guidance, because I'm really interested to hear what they've seen. And a lot of the times for me, it's what they don't acknowledge that is the blind spots that are actually the parts that we chase then together in that learning and development plan.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you. Flint, why don't we flick it over to you and talk a little bit about this conversation of scalability, because Matt, you've got, I wouldn't exactly call it a smaller system, but Flint at USA Hockey, it's probably one of the bigger beasts out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and so do you want to just give us a bit of a sense of what you guys are doing, sort of I know you've got a lot that's been going on pre-COVID, and then now with the move online.
Yeah, sure. So thank you everyone for your time, and I'm happy to be here today. So at USA Hockey, we're an all volunteer force for the most part. And so on an average year, we have to train about 24,000 coaches throughout the country across the United States. And I think probably in the last 2 years, we've been evaluating our effectiveness with regards to athlete development. And one of the conclusions we came to is perhaps the disconnect is giving our coaches the ability to be effective teachers. So we've really started concentrating on how we take the curriculum that we thought was pretty good and applying adult learning principles and active learning principles so that our coaches become better teachers, and that therefore our athletes will learn better material. And so we've spent a lot of time in the last year and a half on I guess the how to coach skills and not just the what to coach skills. And how do you deploy something at scale for something that's that difficult, right? I can't get in, I take care of the Pacific District, which is basically the western quarter of the United States. And even then, I'm responsible for probably close to 8,000 coaches in my district, so I'm not going to be able to get into the rink. So we use a series of classes where coaches come, and we've really flopped the learning to not just focus on the what to coach stuff, the hockey skill or the tactical training or strategic training, but to really talk about how to communicate and how to make sure that athletes are actually learning the material that the coaches want them to learn. So it's actually a really different way to look at things. And then, of course, in the last 2.5 months, while we were getting ready to deploy all this new curriculum, because it was scheduled to deploy this summer, we've had a change with COVID. So now the challenge became, how do we deploy this at scale and not turn our classes back into presentation mode, right? Where there's one talking head at the front of the classroom and then a whole bunch of people listening in their living rooms now. And so we've had some challenges there using Zoom, but it's been a pretty neat thing. We've managed, and we've piloted 2 programs, and we've managed to run 2 classes with breakout rooms and lots of active learning and adult learning techniques to help coaches learn material that would help their athletes. I mean, as far as even micro coaching and taking certain instances, and it's hard to go into detail, but if people have questions, I'd be happy to answer. But where we actually give coaches, even through Zoom, an opportunity to take on certain scenarios within coaching and working with athletes, so that the focus doesn't necessarily become just drills, because that's in USA Hockey, that seems to be the answer for a lot of our coaches, is they say that their athletes aren't learning because the drill is bad. And I think our conclusion is probably that maybe it's because the coach isn't so good. So how do we get coaches to understand that it's not so much what they're teaching or not teaching, but it's how they're teaching that is resulting in a disconnect between the learning goal and actually what's being learned by the athlete. So I'm not quite sure if that provides a lot of information to everyone, but I can take specific questions with regards to how we handled it in presentations during the COVID outbreak, and then what our plans are going over the next 6 to 12 months. It's been a lot of big changes for USA Hockey.
Yeah, thanks, Flint. I think, certainly we can all relate to the idea of a lot of moving parts in what's a incredibly uncertain time, and I think we are providing a great opportunity here for us all just to reconnect and make sure we're all on the same page. Speaking of the challenges of the technology, Steve, are you able to resume? We got you. I think you were sort of at that transparency section in your slides. Are you able to jump back on?
Yes, that's wonderful.
We got you.
Yes, that we were talking about was the reflection part, and how important it was that we made sure that that was an essential area of what we did with our coaches. Essentially, the 4 elements that I discussed that I hope will be the takeaway for people who are dialing in today would be that it has to be a program that's in alignment with everything else. There has to be collaboration between the coach developer, the coach. There has to be transparency, and then that key part at the end, the reflection. And essentially, within Steel Sports, what we have done is we have made sure whenever a coach observation takes place, that coach is familiar with what the process is. And for us, what that means is that there are several steps. The first one being obviously the observation of the on-field performance of the coach with their group. The second expectation then is that a coach must complete an online reflection form within 24 hours of the session. So before any discussion or feedback takes place, the coach themselves completes that online form, which is part of their internal system that we have. The coach developer should then review that coach's feedback before they share any of their comments with the coach. And it's essential at this point that the coach developer takes into account any moments within the session where the coach themselves has recognized there was an issue and how they would deal with it. So we will amend or edit our comments according to what the coach themselves has reflected upon. It's important that this all happens within 72 hours and that the coach the coach developer's observations are shared with the coach within 72 hours, because as we all know, the more immediate that is, the more effective it is. We ask that the coaches then meet with the coach developer. Sometimes that's physically challenging. If they can't meet in person, we ask that they Skype, and only as a last resort would they use the phone to review the feedback. We think it's very, very important that there's interaction whenever possible when you're giving feedback to a coach, so that you can tell not only that they are receiving the information and feedback, but the way in which they're receiving it. And obviously an indication or a concern would be if a coach is not willing to accept that there's help that they need. So that's why it's important we think it's done in person whenever possible. Both the parties agree upon an action plan at that stage. We will have identified certain strengths and some weaknesses, some areas for improvement. The coach developer and the coach will agree upon the action plan, and then we'll follow up within 4 to 6 weeks with the second visit with that particular coach. And the emphasis will be, if we've identified an area of weakness or somewhere where they can grow in terms of coaching, that they address that particular element as opposed to worrying about the overall session. What I would also say is we have kept a fairly detailed log of the number of sessions that we've done coach observations for. In 2019, that was 345 coach developer sessions we conducted. So 345 occasions where a coach developer observed a coach. We managed to see 146 of our 156 what we call full-time coaches, so 93%. And those coaches were spread out in the states of Massachusetts, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Texas, California, and Washington. So we do have regional coach developers in all of those regions with staff, as well as myself as the national director. And although 93% is quite good, we obviously failed in terms of hitting our target of 100%. There were some implications for 2020, and one of those implications that I want to share with everyone is the majority of our observations took place at practice sessions. And we did notice when we observed them at game day, which I think is an essential part of coach development, that some of the skills that they adeptly exhibited in training were not as evident in game day situations. So one of our implications for 2020 is we will increase dramatically the number of game day observations that we conduct with our staff. I then was going to share, and I'm not sure if Cam's got it up, but I was going to share a coach reflection form and also one of our 5 feedback forms that we have. If we haven't been able to share those, I will make them available to the USCCE so they can share with anyone who would like to see the couple of examples that we have. And the meaningfulness of the examples is that I think they again re-emphasize the important point of the program alignment. So when we go out, we have 6 areas that we observe our coaches in terms of their performance. And they range from the first being organization, which is very straightforward in terms of management of the equipment of the group and making sure the environment's safe, that they have a session plan. The second one, which is one of our key areas, is relationships. And we've done a lot of work with the Research Institute regarding positive development and relationships between youths and adults. So we will challenge our coaches to make sure that they are actually focused on a positive development relationship, which means they'll challenge the growth of their athletes. They'll provide support for their athletes. They'll expand the possibilities of the athlete within the sport. They'll also share the power of the session by having them involved in some of the decision making, and they will consistently express care about the person as well as the athlete. So that is key to us. The other areas we look at are communication, game understanding, and then our own core values. We insist that our coaches include a core value in every session plan they deliver. Our core values are teamwork, respect, integrity, and commitment. And when we evaluate a coach, we evaluate the fact that they have modeled in terms of their actions and behaviors these core values, and that when the opportunities have arisen, that they've taught them. So that's basically my spiel about Steel Sports. I do apologize for all the technical difficulties. Again, I would refer to my 4 key elements. And if you're trying to establish or already have an established coach development program, assess that you do in fact have that program which is in alignment with everything else that you do. It's a collaborative process that takes place. There is full transparency, and that the long-term aim has to be reflection so that coaches are conducting their own development, and it is therefore continuous, and it is therefore something they're vested in. So you can share any questions you might have with me at the end or via email. All of my information will be available through USCCE. Sorry. Okay. Thanks, Cam.
Thanks, Steve. That was awesome. Pelle, how about your various perspectives on all that's going on? You're a multi-continental man. Are you stateside right now? What continent are you in?
I'm in Michigan right now.
Oh, you are in Michigan. Very good. Why don't you go ahead?
I'm isolated in a basement in Michigan, trying to stay away from people after a long travel. There we go. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me to share some of my experiences and my daily work. And again, giving me an opportunity to learn from not only the panelists, but hopefully also from people listening in. I'll try to speed through, particularly the first part of the presentation. That is done to just put us into the context of how I operate. So in Norway, we have one governing body of sports, which is the National Olympic and Paralympic Committee and Confederation of Sport. And quite a bit of the funds are coming from government through the lottery, national lottery, of the work that we are doing in order to support the 54 national sports associations, and then a network of sports clubs, some of them single sport, many of them multi-sports clubs. So that's the way that the general setup in Norway. Now, we also have an international development team who is supporting work in countries where Norway have bilateral agreements. So money again comes from the government, but here from a different department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and 2 countries where we, like I said, have bilateral agreements. So there are more countries than this, but these are the areas where we are working in terms of sport. I'm basically, from day to day, I'm based in Zambia, but I'm covering work in Zambia, Zimbabwe, and in Malawi. and I'm going to present a little bit on that. There is a lot of similarities in the approach that we're working both in Norway and internationally. And the countries where we work in, they have a little bit of a similar setup. So they have a strong central governing sports body, which is a little bit different from here in the US, where things seems to be a little bit more segmented. But the way it's done there is that we are running the initial coach developer training is done centrally in close collaboration with the national associations. So in Norway, for instance, all 54 associations have bought into the general concept of coach development and the coach development pathways. And then they will contextualize it and put it into their sport-specific kind of situation. So, and then the deployment of all the coach developers is done according to the need of the national associations. And that's the same in Zambia, for instance. Basketball is mentioned as an example, or in Norway through Norwegian skiing. I often get this question, I love this question, is a coach developer, is it a role or is it a function? And my answer often is, or typically is yes. I think that the countries that we work with don't have coach developers as a title. I know that in some countries with mature systems like in Ireland and Canada and other places, coach developer is an operational function. But in the countries where we work, technical directors or course instructors or mentors and coach mentors working with support in the field are typical titles. And then when it comes to the functions, what we are trying to do is to give people an opportunity to function within their titles and roles, whether it's working within formal education and designing the training of formal education, or just to become a critical friend, you know, or a mentor, or someone to speak with. So that completely depends on the need of the various association. The key thing is that in terms of the key thing is to be clear on the role in a way of a coach developer, which is to create a conducive learning and development environment for the coaches that stimulates their ability to reflect, to grow and improve performance, as well as coach well-being, which is very central, especially in these days with the COVID and so forth. And then eventually, like Stephen was mentioning, to support and create a more need-supportive kind of context for their athletes, so ultimately leading to their autonomous functioning and performance, and again, the joy and safety. So I think that's the kind of key, whether you're a course director or whatever you're doing. One of the main things that we're trying to do though, and the work as a coach developer, the concept as a coach developer has led to, is this move away from the kind of large scale approach to coach development. You know, Flint was talking to the challenges now in US hockey, you know, especially now under the COVID. How do you move away from the kind of like large scale development where you are running courses and it's one-way training, and trying to move more into the more tailored approach, so that people can either pick according to what they need and also based on the assessment of what they want. So a much more need and want based kind of coach development system. This is where we work in two ways in Zambia. One of them is to run coach developer training sessions. And the key thing that we're doing here is that we are using some collective knowledge and good practice internationally. I hate to use the word standards, especially global standards, because I don't think global standards are very relevant often. But to use that collective knowledge that is being developed from around the world, we're trying to adapt the training locally and give it proper cultural relevance, and then to work with the people who come for the training, for them to be able to filter all the training we're doing into the context that they need. And here's a couple of examples of some of the things we're doing. We have a lot of training sessions where we use coaches and we use coach developers to observe coaching sessions And then we use time to assess and to have proper coach conversations or coach developer conversations with them and give them feedback. So a lot of filming, a lot of recording, a lot of reflection. Focus is learning, reflection, facilitation, and also how to actually provide proper coach support out in the field. Here's an example of a facilitation session where we've been filming the man in a black shirt there. He's a coach developer. He's a coach. The one who is watching, so you guys are coach developers, and then the athletes is on the bike. And we often choose activities that are not sport specific so that we can focus on those how to coach skills that Flint was mentioning. So again, the famous backward bike that I'm sure all of you have seen being used, but it takes away the focus on the sport specific thing and on a learning situation, which is different. We also work quite a bit with individual coaches and coach developers, and we have kind of taken our own adapted take on the GROW model of John Whitmore. Primarily, we are focusing, like Matthew and all of you have been mentioning, to build the relationship and create the proper connection with between the coach and the athlete, or the coach developer and the coach in this instance. And we have developed a process which we are not following step by step, but we are tailoring and following based on the need of the various coaches. So it could lead to various forms of observation if that is needed, and so on. I'll stop there. I just want to thank you again for letting me share some of the work, and really hope to get some input from you. I've already taken loads of notes, getting great ideas. So I'm hoping to learn more from everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Pelle. As always, lots of really good stuff. We'll open it up to questions now, and there's already a couple that have been thrown into the chat function there. So please go ahead, Flint. Why don't we start off with you, because I think there's a couple of questions here in terms of what you guys have done to develop your coach developers, but specifically. Abby asked a question: what did USA Hockey do to help coaches recognize that how they coach is distinct from what they coach?
Well, I think it's probably more of a mindset with regards to how we see coach development. I would say that all of the coach developers we used to call coaching education program instructors, we used to think it was about content, right? We used to think it was about X's and O's, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. So that was one thing, was to change our mindset about what it is important, what is important with regards to what coaches should be learning, and not looking at our classrooms as the end all be all of all coach development, like to shift them from more of an experience learning type of situation where the classroom inspires people to continue learning when they're out of the classroom, which for us is huge because we can't see them 365 days a year. In fact, we see them once a year. I think that's part one. Part two is using our classroom as an opportunity to do more like micro coaching opportunities. That's what the USCCE calls it. And putting coaches in these environments where they take their drills or their thoughts and try to mimic what techniques they currently use with regards to players or athletes, and for them to see themselves that the methodologies that they are using don't work. And I think that really inspires them to reflect within the classroom and to slowly make those changes. I think at one point some coach said, man, me yelling at my kids might not have anything to do with the kids not understanding. I think he says, and pardon the French, but he said, man, I'm just a shitty coach. And so I think that's what we did, is a complete mindset change. And then I think the third thing that we did was we started to really understand that we tried to stuff too much into our coaching education program, right? I mean, you always balance the needs of what we think we want coaches to learn with how much time they want to dedicate to the process of learning. So I think over time, to use the analogy of food, we would stuff them with McDonald's, so much so that we didn't really understand what they were learning. And so now we've really trimmed the fat, right? Remove the cholesterol and really think about what it is that we want our coaches to learn. And we've emphasized more of this experiential learning, that it's not about X's and O's and it's not about drills. It's what can we give them as more of an overall template, right? And I use the template, I guess it's more with regards to ethos. What are the things that you need to do as a coach? I hope that answers that question, because that's what we're doing. And it seems to be working. I mean, it's a pretty small scale so far, but it seems to be working.
And I guess a follow-up, that's really helpful. And I think a follow-up for that, Flint, and we might go around to each of you guys in your opinions on this one, or your experiences, but what are you guys doing to help develop your coach developers? And I don't know, Flint, if you want to speak specifically to your own experiences of what are some of the things that you've done, because I think many of us are experiencing various degrees of resistance to what it is. You know, we've done it this way. We've always done it this way. We just jam them with content, and we throw enough spaghetti on the wall, eventually it'll stick. But do you want to speak to a little bit of your personal experiences of how to develop coach developers, and specifically for your own experiences?
Yeah, for us, I think reaching coach developers wasn't as difficult. I mean, we had 2 massive trainings. We have, 200 plus coach developers throughout the country. And I don't think that was as difficult, because they tend to be people who are educators. I mean, there's always this subset of people that don't believe in it. And I think our attitude there was, especially being an all volunteer base, we used to say to ourselves, we've got to teach to the least common denominator. And we really started changing our mindset that if we're going to have a cultural value of developing coach developers who have the right mindset with regards to education, that some of them may not move on, right? Some of them through the course of training may not be a good fit. And I think that was hard for our organization to accept. So I think that would be one. And then 2, with regards to coach acceptance, right? So having developers be acceptance of the program. I think we're still working on coach acceptance, and I think that's something that we always struggle with. But I think now the flip has been, I think coaches always saw themselves as more drill instructors. That's probably the best analogy. And maybe not as teachers, right? And definitely not as educators. I don't think they saw themselves, along that spectrum. And so to really change the curriculum, we spend a lot more time on, the how to observe skills, the how to explain, the how to, all of those how to coach skills that have been broken down by the USCCE. And we actually put them in the classroom, so they have to do those skills, even via Zoom. When we did these things via Zoom in these 3-4 pilots that we've done, we actually put them in breakout rooms. We have them, teach each other into quote unquote micro coach. And I think that has been enlightening. Does it convert them? I couldn't tell you exactly because it's short, but I'm pretty sure it illuminates a light bulb, right? It's this light bulb that says, yes, wow, it might be me and it's not my drill. So at least in hockey, traditionally it's always been the drill is bad, or the kid is bad, or the parents suck, or whatever that situation is. Now I think the coaches are much more reflective and they're introspective about what they can do to alter those things. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's great. And Matt, I'll flick it over to you. I like that concept, Flint, of conversion. Matt, how did you get converted to being a coach developer?
Meaning personally there, mate, or within Irish Rugby, or?
Yeah, why not? Let's go with the personal. Let's make it real.
So I guess we'll go down that personal track then. For me, I come from a teaching background. So for me, education has always been first and foremost in what I have looked to achieve from a coach development point of view. So I want long-term behavior change in what I'm doing personally with the coaches that I'm interacting with. And therefore, in developing our coach developers, I'm trying to get them to think of that through the same lens as well. So how can we be supporting our coaches at all levels so that we get positive long-term behavior change? Because I think that this whole area of coach development is on a really, really steep growth curve, if that's the right way to explain it. And I'm personally really excited about the way we're going. I think it's meeting the needs a lot more of our coaches, adult learning, all of those concepts that we've heard the other panelists talk about, I think are outstanding. But we've got to be accelerating at the same rate with our deliverers of this development, or else we're compromising what we do. And so that can be a challenge, because, you know, it wasn't that long ago, it was just coach education, which was the transfer of knowledge from a perceived expert to a novice, and we were happy with that. Now we're asking for really deep, quality individual conversations that are pulling information, being able to follow up in different environments without the ability to necessarily prepare a lot in advance. So that is a challenge. But I think if we get this idea that we're seeking long-term behavior change, then that's the starting point. Because for us in rugby, in my experiences, we were getting a real spike in behavior change, say for the first 3 to 6 weeks after an engagement. But then if we really challenged ourselves, if we went back and saw those coaches 3 months, 4 months later, most of them were probably reverting back to pretty close to where they were before we got involved. So we were busy, but not having the impact that we wanted. So long-term focus around getting permanent behavior change and trying to upskill along the way.
Yeah, very good. That's a great answer. And I think over to you, Steve, in terms of, you know, you shared a couple of those measurement tools, but you know, I think you're another one that definitely speaks to behavioral change. Do you want to speak a little bit? I know that before the call, when we were planning for this, Stephen, we were talking about just your evolution in the 30 plus years you've been in the US as a coach developer. Do you want to speak a little bit to that and a little bit about what, you know, some of the measures of success have been as well?
Yeah, so as quickly as I can, you know, when we founded our company those 28 years ago, we were fortunate enough to realize, because as was just referenced, we were all educators. We were all people who played sports and then teaching background. And we, from the get-go, we thought coach development was something that we had to do. So essentially, we've evolved from that situation where I'll focus a little bit on how we're handling the training of the coach developers within our organization. And we're fortunate because we have the wherewithal and we have the financial backing to do this. But 3 years ago, we decided we need to vastly increase the number of coach developers. And we asked, we put it out there and said, who wants to be part of the coach development? It was about 20% of our staff got back to us. There was about 35 of them. 23 of them went through the full 12-hour course that they have to with us, which involved them observing coach development, a coach developer working, then doing a coach development alongside them, delivering the message. So there was quite intensive training. And one of the most fruitful things we've found is that the 23 people who stuck with it and who've become coach developers, believe it or not, have taken on the extra time, the extra work, and the extra hours with no increase in the salary that's involved. And what it basically has led us to understand is in our endeavors to retain good staff, the status that's involved with coach development now, in America in particular, elevates your position and your feeling of belonging to an organization and how you can help others. So we've developed a pretty rigorous coach development training plan. We're really pleased with the way it's evolved, and we're really pleased to see that now we have first-year coach developers going out and assessing coaches who've been on the field for 20 years, and it's accepted by all. But I did want to mention just one thing, and it was raised by a couple of guys. It's a shift in culture. We're talking about a complete shift in culture, and I'll go back again to program alignment. So within an organization, you have to have a culture which is going to encourage people to continually want to improve. And you're also going to have to emphasize those things that, I hate this expression, soft skills of coaching, the sports agnostic coaching.
We call them the extremely hard things of coaching, not the soft skills. You know, the things like building relationships. And I think that leads us to not only worry about the X and O's, but also to worry about the how to coach, how to teach, and how to educate. So I do believe there has to be a culture shift. I do believe that comes from your mission, vision, core values. I do believe if you establish that, you establish that sense of collaboration. And I do believe that then leads to people wanting to be involved. And we're now at the great stage where out of our 156 coaches, easily 70 to 80% of them will request that we come and watch them coach and give them feedback. They'll ask for more. And they definitely believe that it's a collaborative process and one that they can grow from. So I do believe there needs to be a culture shift. I do believe, as with everything else, if you don't have an intentional program that's going to develop coaches, you're not going to develop coach developers. And for me, the next stage of coach development is that it is intrinsically done by the coach themselves. So we now, one of the goals that we set all of our coaches along with their CEUs is they must complete a minimum of 12 coach reflections a season, whether we're seeing them or not. So that's, for me, they're the keys. A culture shift, and the future of coach development is to hand the power of it to the coaches themselves.
Yeah, awesome answer. And Matt, just to share, I think it's a great add as well in terms of quality of measuring or establishing quality measures for coach development, because there's the qualitative but also the quantitative aspect, and retention's probably, as you mentioned there, a critical piece. Pelle, I want to flick it over to you because I think Mel asked a great question that Steve just touched on. But Pelle, you know, from your various perspectives, where do you think we're heading as in terms of the evolution of coach development? What's the future?
Well, I think there's been some really good stuff coming out of this. I've ink all over me. I mean, I like some of these things that is being touched upon now in terms of that conversion from the process of looking from. I've been taking some notes from the bully, the instructor, the drill instructor, the mistake detector, to the pulley, the kind of learning facilitators and kind of connectors for people. I think one of the things that we've been working on is to use the concept of athlete-centeredness and trying to get a good understanding of what that means, and then pulling it up a level in terms of focusing on coach education as you know, also to really use that concept to dig a little bit deeper on how we are creating these learning environments also for coaches. But it is a process, and it takes time to shift that culture. But I agree with Matthew. I think that the curve here is very steep. I think we're moving fast. This happened a lot the last 5 years, and I think we are on a good road. But it's important for me, at least, to get new ideas and get new approaches on how to continue to steepen the curve. So I don't know if that answers you, but that's what I got.
Awesome, Pelle. Well, why don't we open it up? I think Kristen's got her finger on the magic button here for the breakout rooms. So love to have all of you begin this conversation of where do you think coach development is heading, the evolution, given the theme of the virtual summit here is the future of coach development. Kristen is going to, at some point here, press the button, and we're all just going to be zapped into the breakout rooms, and there's the finger ready to press on the trigger. So we'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. And Brianna, I haven't missed your question. I want to circle back and answer that one when we come back. So Kristen, ready, set, there you go.
Yeah, got me. Thank you very much. We had a really interesting discussion about someone who's faced the challenge of dealing with school districts and the challenge of dealing with those people virtually, you know. So trying to create a culture of acceptance and positivity towards coach development. And I was just about to explain a couple of practical hints when we got cut off. So I just throw out, there was a young lady, and please feel free to reach out to me individually, but you know, we're dealing with a couple of school districts, and one of the reasons we're getting them to buy into it is because of some of the bullying incidents that have happened and hazing incidents at high schools. And essentially, we're saying we can teach your coaches how to create a more holistic approach and atmosphere within the athletes, addressing the person as well as the athlete. So for those reasons, we've actually got some buy-in from a legal standpoint, which we've then led to us being able to persuade coaches to think more about the how, the why, rather than the what.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, the evolution is vast, and I don't know, is Flint still on? I'm flicking through the Brady Bunch photos here, and
Yeah, I'm still here.
oh yeah, awesome. How about your group, Flint? You know, you get the final word, because I know KD's gonna flick us over in a minute or so. So what? How about you guys? Where do you see this all going? To Mel's wonderful question.
I think our nugget might be that really changing the culture with regards to coaches and helping coaches understand that they have an educational role to coach other coaches, right? Like, because in our room, we talked a lot about scale and how we get this type of quality education. Well, the only way you do that is if coaches become coach developers themselves, and to have a more sharing attitude with regards to their community. So I think that's the nugget, right? That's the challenge going forward, is how do we replicate this process at scale?
No, thanks, Flint. And I think that's that's a huge one for organisations like yours and others, where we try and expand the reach, so to speak. I know in our group, Scott mentioned the growing importance of mental health, and I think now is as significant of a time where we all are mindful of the touch that we have on each other, not only our colleagues, but people that we don't know. It's trying times, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it's not easy for almost all of us. It doesn't matter if we turn on a television or check an email, that they are really, really difficult times, and that learning and the support for each other. There are a number of comments here. Judith mentioned risk management. Laurie mentioned just how can we help to improve our own learning, and the value of the technology, but also many of us have been exposed to the power of communities of practice. And so as we get to the top of the time here, I just want to just confirm or re-emphasize how wonderful this is an opportunity. And I think Kristen mentioned in the chat there that it's a real bummer that we couldn't all be together face to face in Alabama, but to be able to connect like this, for me, I mean, it's maybe more powerful because we're getting connections to folks that wouldn't have been able to join us. So I'm super excited about the next couple of days, and just want to wrap up by saying thank you to everybody, and particularly to our panelists, to Steve, to Flint, to Matt. And particularly Pelle, you've shared with us some great insights, and there's lots more to come. Particularly in 15 minutes, Laurie's going to get things rolling again, and we've got a number of other events, program accreditation events on June the 15th and June 22nd, and we're already starting the advertising for next year. So looking forward to an exciting next couple of days of learning, and hand it over to you, Kristen, to keep things rolling.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cam, and thank you to the panel. That was an amazing start to our virtual summit.